Super. Working? Yeah. All right. So David's going to get this fixed up for me in a second. So this is the second time I've been here with the IFMA San Diego chapter. I'm happy to be a returning speaker. I'm excited about that very much. So I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. I've been with Herman Miller for 11 years now. I support the Western U.S. and Western Canada, BC and Alberta in terms of workplace strategy, kind of folks going through some deep workplace transformation. I started in facilities at Herman Miller, was an IFMA member, and then transitioned over into strategy work. So I'm excited not just to be back here with my IFMA friends, but my facility friends as well. So today's just going to kind of be a thimble full of information around change readiness in the workplace environment, some kind of tips and tricks. I started this conversation a couple of years ago when organizations that we support were asking to kind of get them moving beyond just kind of a furniture purchase, but really thinking about how we can be prepared for change readiness as we really make major transformations, not just kind of, some small stuff, but really going through some transformative work. So I put this research document together, and I presented it at NeoCon East over in Philadelphia about 3 years ago, and then submitted it to conference at IDEX in Toronto. So this is that work that you're able to see. Please keep in mind that there's a lot of good research here, so if you're interested, my colleague Candace Young is in the back here. And you're welcome to give her your contact information, and she can provide you with the lit review on this if you're interested in kind of pulling the information. Okay. So I want us to think about, this is just kind of, and I know this is small text, it's not meant to sort of read, I'm just wanting to share with you kind of the onslaught of being ready for change. So I'm a member of this group called the Association for Talent Development. It's an organization through HR, learning and development folks to kind of get professionals ready for leadership in an organization, how they think about OD kind of work. And they have a change process, which again, significant notes, go to Candace for that kind of research. But the idea is that there's a couple of steps in their idea of a change process, kind of thinking about the challenges of the current state, being able to align leadership, activate commitment, nurturing and formalizing the design. The whole idea here is that what I'd really like to share as we go through this conversation is how we as facilities folks can have good, meaningful, substantive conversations with executive leadership at our organization to really think about the importance of change readiness, to get us on board. So this is also kind of think of it in terms of a development to get us ready for those kind of meaningful conversations from a facilities and real estate standpoint. The other thing they talk about is really putting together a guide and then evaluating change. Now I will tell you that rarely does any organization go through this evaluation process. They're already on to the next project. But they like talking about being able to evaluate, although that rarely happens in my opinion. So here's all the different, or just really not all, but just a couple of them. These are 5 different ways that we can think about the change process. So there's ATD's model, there's Kurt Lewin, there's another guy, John Cotter, very well known in terms of the work in terms of change management, etc. The idea here, what I'm trying to show is that there's a bunch of ways that you can think about change. The big thing is that you just think about it and move towards some type of implementation. And if you need help, there's lots of different opportunities for you to access that if you need to. Just get a plan. In my opinion, it really doesn't matter. The idea is that they're all sort of thinking about, I like Kurt Lewin's work, it's about sort of unfreezing the current culture, transitioning to where you want to be as an organization, and then refreezing that, kind of solidifying the culture. That's sort of the easiest way to think about transformational change. The big thing as we get ready to kind of think about how we want the organization to transform and how that overall workplace environment can support it is understanding that when they go through some change, there'll always be this dip in productivity. But the big idea is the WIFM, or what's in it for me, right? Everybody wants to know what they're going to get out of this kind of new work environment. So be ready for that and be able to understand that there's going to be some time for adoption. So we just gotta be prepared for that. So in putting my kind of tips and tricks together, I tried 10, I put 11, but there's really 12, which you'll see in a second. So I couldn't stop, right, beyond my top 10 list. But this is just kind of my thoughts in terms of how we've worked with organizations, general things that I think are important for us to think about. You may not like number 7 or number 6, and that's fine. Just take 2, 4, and 1, whatever you like. The idea is that you take some of this with you to be able to think a bit more thoughtfully with leadership. So I'm going to go through this in the next couple of minutes here. So I mentioned, right, there are 11, but there's really 12. In my mind, the last time I was here a year, maybe 2 years ago, I talked about the importance of understanding utilization of space, how space is being used. And I call that here kind of starting at 0, if you will. Really understanding the current space can help us be prepared, be ready for the change in the future, because you got to know what today is based on. So the idea here is that we want to think about what's happening in that space. We use little sensors, we place them underneath chairs, and we determine what that utilization is. However you determine it, it's fine. The idea is that we really want to understand that current state. Now, when we ask employees what they think their utilization of the current state is, these are 5 real organizations. When we asked employees, one employee group, because in surveys they're always going to tell you that they're at their desk 24 hours a day, okay? 84%, this one site, we're always at our desk. In actuality, they were at their desk 39% of the time. This is fact, true fact among organizations across industry, across North America. This is what we see. The perception is that they're always at their desk. The reality is they're either downstairs, down the hall, down the street, or in Knoxville. They're somewhere else, but not at their desk. Even if you feel like they're busting at the seams, there's really space available, quite honestly, in my opinion. The idea is that we just got to know where you are, really. Not some survey, but some real kind of utilization information, some real quantitative data. So after you figure that out, which takes more than 15 minutes to kind of figure that out, right? You got to understand that evaluation process from a facility standpoint. The next thing, the big thing, number 1, right, is really understanding what the vision is. So I love this quote from Yogi Berra. You got to be careful if you don't know where you're going, because you might not get there. And that is very true, right? This idea is more of, why are we doing something? Why are we going through this workplace change? Well, I call it the Bob and Karen effect. It's because either Bob or Karen said so, and that's why we're going through this change, right? The thought is, if I were to ask an organization that's currently going through this on the spot right now to give me their 20-second elevator pitch, which I'll be doing tomorrow, why are you going through this? And if it's silent, that is a problem, right? Everybody should be able to stand up and tell me in a 20-second elevator pitch why they're doing this. And not because Bob and Karen said so, but because of the business impact that it's going to create with the organization, what they're trying to achieve. So I have this sectioned into questions that I think we might want to ask, choose to or not, and then ways that you might be able to implement that. So some of the questions here, I'm getting my bifocals when I get back, or my progressives when I get back to Dallas, so I don't have them with me. So I understand for folks in the back of the room, this might be a little small, so I'll read this. One idea is, why do we exist as an organization, and what purpose are we trying to fulfill? This is about purpose as a larger organization. Then thinking about, how will the change we are undertaking take us closer to our vision, right? This is the why the heck are we changing the panels, right, in the workplace? Why are we doing this? Can I explain to others how their efforts are directly related to the mission of the organization? And if I asked people what the organization was trying to achieve by this new type of space, would they be able to answer it? If it's silence or no, there's a problem here, right? So we really need to kind of focus on responding to this particular question. So ways that we might want to think about that, activities, kind of, right, how you can solve for this, is understanding what's working well and not within the current state, thinking about obstacles and enablers. What are the attributes of an ideal kind of workplace that we're trying to get to? And really start trying to rank them. And that's tough, because people will sort of say, well, we want to achieve all of these different things. Well, 20 things is quite hard. So let's figure out what our top 3 are that we want to focus on. One way that you can think about this in building the case for why, to kind of have those good conversations with your ELT groups from a facility standpoint, is thinking about the business case for that transformation, right? For that workplace transformation. A lot of times what we hear these days is that it's around attraction and retention of top talent. So not just warm bodies, but the best, right? The best that we can get. And does our workplace, do you feel comfortable during an interview process, HR, walking the employee around and showing them how awesome the space is? If not, that's a problem, right? That really may not help us, or the physical environment may not help us be able to attract and retain the top talent. Other ideas are around strengthening brand connection. We really want a space that allows people to understand the culture and character of who we are as an organization. Sometimes it's around building community. A lot of times what we find right now, because of people retiring, is the idea of knowledge sharing and the importance of knowledge sharing when you have new folks coming in and others that are about to retire in 2 or 3 years, right? So how can we promote that knowledge sharing? A lot of times, high-walled cubicles may not support knowledge sharing, right? It's hard to get to those people who are on their way out if, one, they don't see you or are interested in kind of having that conversation. So the knowledge sharing is a critical piece in this kind of conversation as to why we might want to go through this transformation. But you have to pick that for the organization, right? Each organization kind of has to determine that. One of the simplest ways we think it's important to think about change is in this way, right? So I mentioned all those different types of pieces earlier, kind of change management strategies. In our thought process, this is kind of where it gets down to the chase of things. One is establishing the vision. Why the heck are we doing this in the first place? Beyond Bob and Karen said so. The second part is the knowledge piece, and that's understanding all of the questions about the change, 250 to 300 questions about that change. Am I going to be sitting next to my best friend Jonathan? Will there be a recycling bin at my desk, or do I have to walk down the darn hallway to put the recycling in? Where's the nearest printer going to be? All of that sort of stuff. Will there be daycare? Will there be a place for parking? Will it only be 6 feet, or will it be 8 feet, right? All those sorts of things people are going to want to know about the space, so we've got to be able to answer it in many different ways. The other part is dissatisfaction. I put a little H to it because it's not just understanding what's wrong with the current space, but it's a healthy sense of what's not working well, right? So that's the HD, healthy sense of dissatisfaction. So the idea is around place-based change. If you inform people why we're doing this from a business vision standpoint, and you answer all of their questions multiple times in multiple ways, and we understand what's currently not working well or obstacles in the current environment, then alligator eats the bigger issue right here. So that's a little hint here. The perceived cost of the change is then outweighed, hopefully. Not with everybody, not with all, every particular employee, but the idea is that the perceived cost of the change is outweighed by your depth of work here. So I'm not saying that that's the full responsibility of FM folks, but I am saying that it is up to us to help create this case for moving toward a particular strategy around the importance of change, and that we should be able to speak to that from a facility standpoint to executives, right, in this sort of way. So the second thing, and I'll speed up as we go, but the first couple of ones are super important, I think, in my mind. So the second thing is being able to challenge your thinking, right, and thinking about flexible ways of thinking. So out of all of this sort of gobbledygook that I have here on the screen, the biggest thing in my mind is what I've put together in the square here. Again, go to Canvas for the depth of the information here. So what we find, and I just mentioned this with the table there in the back, is that a number of folks feel when change happens, especially in their work environment, that they're in an either-or situation. Either I am moving into an open plan, or I'm going to be in only private spaces, right? What we want to do is shift that thinking from a facility standpoint from either-or to both-and, where you can have both open space, where you need to do collaborative work with a team or cross-functional groups, and and you can have private space where you need to do kind of heads down or focused work. The problem that arises is when we aren't engaging with a good design partner that will help you or guide you through that both and conversation, right? Challenges arise when you get stuck in an either or situation. So I would ask that you engage with your architecture and design partners to really think about what both and can mean. And I mentioned in the back an example that I have with a customer in Memphis. Every time someone would talk about the need for private spaces or doing kind of heads down work, the company would constantly say, we have 132 spaces where you can do that throughout this campus. 132 spaces, 132 spaces, 132 spaces. And they said it so many times, everyone really understood there was a both and opportunity for them to be able to do heads down kind of work in those kind of spaces. So that's the thing that I think that we need to think about in terms of challenging that sort of thinking and assumptions. And then I talk about kind of ways that we can do this by understanding your basic stakeholder analysis. This is not an official Herman Miller graphic. This is sort of my way of thinking about things here. The idea is that when we do a stakeholder analysis to find off who's pissed off and who's excited, right, is to understand kind of where those departments might fall, right? So these are your cheerleader groups, people that really have an active level of support and they're totally engaged. It's important as we go through change readiness that we understand, document, and acknowledge who those groups are. The merchandising department, the marketing department, the ops department, who knows what they are, right? But understanding where they fall. At the same time, it's important to understand which groups are really active and engaged, but not in the way that you want them to be actively engaged. These are the pitchfork-wielding, tiki-torch folks that are out to spread ill will amongst the organization, right, and light everything on fire. So you kind of know who they are in your head. It's Marcy, right, or whatever it is, right? It's Marcy in accounting, not Marcy here, right? It's Marcy in accounting. So it's a whole accounting group, right? Not that all those accounting groups are like that. But keep in mind here, we got to acknowledge who they are, because when we acknowledge this part, then it requires us to respond, right? If we know the issue, this is about going to the doctor, right? If you go to the doctor, you find out the issue, and now you have to respond to the issue. All I'm asking is that we put a stakeholder analysis together, figure out where people are, and then respond to it. Is this something that we do on our own? No. But is this something that we need to bring up to our ELT group to start working toward? Yes, I think very much so. This helps us respond to change because we can then put a process together. All right, number 3, and David, you'll help me with my time, right? Wherever you want to do. Okay, good. So the next part, number 3, is to be involved and stay involved in this process. So tell me and I will forget, show me I will remember, involve me and I will understand. Sometimes organizations are concerned that they don't want to bring people into the mix, right? Too many cooks in the kitchen. The idea with this, as you go through workplace transformation, is that you want to bring a lot of folks to the table, right? To bring them on board. This is an uncomfortable piece with some organizations, so you kind of need to figure out where your level of tolerance is for your organization. But to bring people into the process is truly about thinking more about that togetherness kind of approach in the conversation. So ways that you can do that are by implementing things like focus groups and surveys and interviews, etc. So this part will always talk about ways that you can activate. That's because of what you might be hearing, sensing, how might folks be feeling right now, etc. So I think that that's important for us to kind of understand the importance of staying involved. And what we also know through real good research is that when leaders are involved, we ask that they be involved at the beginning of the process because they really need to help guide the idea of what transformation can look like. As we move through this, then we begin to want to have more of a peer influence, right? So for many organizations that go through this, they have what they call their change champion teams. For one organization that starts with a G, theirs was called the G-Move team. Another company that I worked with, theirs was called the Culture Club. It was the idea of putting, which I thought was kind of cool, right, the Culture Club, bringing in this peer influence and then really having them be more involved in that change process as they go along so that others can see this like mentality with the organization. What we also know through good research is that when leaders aren't involved, it all goes to kaput, right? So there has to be a real executive champion, and if there isn't, then that's a major cause for concern. So we want to make sure that leadership, ELT leadership, CEO leadership, is very much involved with the process and is visible, because when that doesn't happen, then we have problems occur. So it's beyond just sort of a letter that comes out, right, or an email from the CEO, but it's really about them being present, she or he being present at a town hall meeting, she or he being present in a video, she or he being present in the departmental kind of meetings and conversations. When they are not visible, that's when problems arise. So the fourth part is about aligning the culture, and this takes a lot of troops, right? Not just sort of our FM group, but really thinking about what this looks like. And I enjoy this quote very much because I hear this all the time. Well, if they don't like it or the change, they can just get a pink slip, right? Somebody in the room always says that to me, right? Well, if they don't like what we're doing, then they can just go leave, right? That's not the best way to think about workplace transformation, right? Not the best. It's really not a great strategy, right, when we're wanting to attract and retain top talent. So the idea is thinking about one of the questions: in what ways will our culture have to change? What aspects of the current culture will be most difficult for people to let go of? There will be transition, and so we're asking that people kind of take this journey and kind of learn through this experience. What we think about, for those that know kind of that Maslow hierarchy of needs, what we're thinking about it in the way of place, the physical environment, is what we would consider these 6 kind of human motivators as they relate to being at work, being in an organization. We really think that people strive for this level of achievement. So how can the place allow us to support this issue of achievement? How can the place allow us to be recognized for our contributions? One would say that when a new person comes into the organization, they want to see and be seen. They want people to know that they're doing good work, and they want to be able to show that good work. And if they're off in a corner where nobody can get to them in a high-walled cubicle, then nobody will be able to see their skills, talents, or abilities. And there may not be things that they're aware of that are going on in the organization because they're blocked off in a cell, if you will, in that cubicle. So the idea of status and achievement are really being able to understand what's going on in that work environment, which is critical. Is there a sense of autonomy and freedom to be able to do what they need to do, to use the tools around them to be successful? Or do they have to go through 4 different people in order to get a meeting room, right? Like, what does that look like in the way of being autonomous at work? Do they have this sense of purpose when they go into a space? Do they understand what it is that they're doing and how they can connect to the larger group? And then is there a sense of belonging? And I think that this is the biggest challenge that we face in kind of where we're going in terms of workplace transformation. Do I feel like I belong here? Does the space allow me to be in a community, right? Or am I in my own little cell somewhere at cell block 8, right, down the hallway? Another way to think about that, and I know that's harsh, but still. Another way to think about this is in terms of organizational character. So one of the big ones, I won't go through all of them, but the idea is, are we more closed or open as an organization? And I'm not talking about legal stuff, but when we think about how work gets done around here at our company, are we generally more closed? Well, we don't share stuff with Mary's department. Or are we more open? We always want to be able to connect and collaborate with Kevin's team. We work really well with them. We can work cross-functionally. That's really awesome. When we think about whether or not we're more closed or open as an organization, that really determines the kind of place and space that would support kind of a more closed or open environment. And there's other ways to look at this, but I think that that's one of the ways that we think about it. Also, is your organization more physical, face-to-face, or more virtual? And will they be more physical or virtual in 5 to 10 years from now, right? Because you're building for the future. Not 5 years ago, you're not building for a workplace that supported work 5 years ago, but really thinking about how that workplace should be for 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. Not even halfway through, David, not even halfway through. So number 5 is, is thinking about honoring emotions. This is, I know it's a little squishy one for facilities folks and real estate folks, I get that. Stay with me though. Being able to honor emotions is really thinking about that human aspect of change. So I would ask, who in the organization feels threatened by this change and why? That's a big part the stakeholder analysis can support. Who views the change as an opportunity and why? Really think about what that can look like. So giving people, this is a big challenge for some organizations, giving people as much advance notice as possible about those changes are really critical. And the reason why is that everybody goes through this emotional shift. This happens with our friends, family, coworkers, spouses, etc., right? We go through this bit of shock and awe, right? Like, oh my goodness, we can't believe this is happening. Then there's a sense of denial. Oh no, this is not, they're not moving out to Carlsbad. That's not going to happen. And then they get angry. They are moving to Carlsbad. I can't believe this. What am I supposed to do, right? Then there's a sense of frustration. Well, how the heck am I going to get there? When am I going to be able to leave? I can drop off my kids to be able to make sure that I can get there on time. Okay, then it's just a bit of apathy. Oh, to heck with it, fine, whatever. Then they move into this kind of neutral zone, a bit of confusion. Okay, well, I have a couple of questions. When are we doing this? Are we moving into a temp space first? Is this actually happening in 2019, or is it really 2021? Then a bit of listlessness, etc. Go through engagement, and hopefully everybody will be excited and thrilled to move out to Carlsbad, right? That's the idea of the change curve. Does it always happen in this glamorous sort of way? Not really. It's a bit messy. But the idea is that everybody kind of goes through this process of change, and that there are emotions that are involved, and we have to think about that well beyond just sort of the facilities aspect, but the human aspects of people in those facilities and how that affects us from an FM standpoint. The big way that we need to think about doing this is number 6, confronting fear. This is one of my favorites. Confronting fear. And I love this quote. Fear is a dark room where negatives develop. And that really is the case. Not all the time do you have the Grim Reaper coming with a chicken kind of coming through here like the graphics shows. But the idea is that we really want to understand what the fear is, that human aspect within the facility. So has anyone become abnormally quiet? They're getting ready with their tiki torches if they are becoming abnormally quiet. What are people really afraid of? Is it the move to Carlsbad, or is it that they're going to have to sit next to Jennifer and they can't stand Jennifer? Like, what is it? What really is it that people are afraid of? Sometimes people are afraid of failure, right? That the project isn't going to go the way it's planned. Sometimes it's fear of the unknown. Well, I really didn't want to move out to this area. Sometimes it's about a loss of control, a loss of belonging, etc. But understanding what it is, a loss of esteem or status, is important to kind of get that human aspect of what's happening within the facility. One way to look at this is the work of Kurt Lewin, which I really like. I think it's super easy to kind of understand. The thought here from Kurt Lewin is that if you have folks, so this side represents challenges, bad stuff, obstacles, okay? And there's always this movement that happens. So there's a concern around fear. There's challenges around mistrust or poor communication. So how do you respond to these things? His argument is that you respond to them with enablers. So how do you confront fear? You get people involved, which is that G-Move team, that culture club team, that change management team, right? So involvement is important. If there's a sense of poor communication, we want to recognize that and be able to respond on a regular basis. I have American Airlines at Dallas right now that is wanting to make sure that there is constant communication so there won't be a lack of information that comes out of the organization. A sense of mistrust, the importance here is giving folks a compelling reason to think about that change. So it's really about understanding if there are concerns, how can we create an opportunity and experience. One of these is around criticism and whether or not the organization has this tolerance for error. Is it okay for us to test and try things out within the space, like a pilot experience or not? That's really a big indicator of whether or not we're okay with testing as an organization. So number 7 is my most difficult personal challenge that I have. I do not really agree with it personally, but it is what we're supposed to do, okay? I like having all my ducks in a row. I like having 110% of the information before I act on anything. That's not great, okay? So, number 7. I don't believe it, but it's what we're supposed to do. Don't wait for perfection, get started. So the idea is that if you know about 60 to 70%, let's get going with it, right? Or else we're going to be stuck, like I might personally be. So the pursuit of perfection often impedes improvement. And so the idea here is that if you have a good sense of information, maybe not 100%, but 60 or 70%, what can you do about it? So the idea from a place-based standpoint as it relates to change is thinking about the importance of piloting, okay? If you want to get started, let's get started in testing. So testing is a pilot. Now, some organizations will call something a pilot, but they have no intention on changing in any way. It's more about them just wanting to, is that anybody? I don't know. So the idea with a pilot is that you really, ideally, want to actually pilot it. So what does that mean? You use a methodology around what works, what doesn't work, what are the changes that needs to happen, etc. So let's call it what it should be, right? One way, if this is sort of the news you can use slide, if you take nothing else away from this, right? So quick ideas that we can think about when we're trying to get started are, I shared this with utilities, so we do a good amount of work with utilities. This is for PG&E. One of the things that we talked about with them in terms of how to kind of get started is creating this talking point communication for work team leaders, because work team leaders really want to know how they're supposed to express the change, and oftentimes we don't give them those tools. So quick bullet points that can help explain why that's happening is critically important, right? So these talking points as to why. I had a company in Las Vegas, when we went through this kind of session, said, look, I'm fine with telling my employees whatever. I just don't know what whatever is. So can you please just tell me why we're doing this? And then I will go tell them. The problem is that every change had already been made, and the director still didn't understand why. That's a problem, right? Like we talked about at the beginning, there was not an understanding of vision. So creating those talking points is ideal, and not in sort of gobbledygook, right? But in real things that people can use to have tangible conversations with their employees. Conduct snack and learns for maybe 45 minutes of what's going on to discuss the why. And it sounds simple, but you could, if you can imagine organizations that don't do, food always helps, I swear. Breakfast, lunch, snacks, we have a lunch tomorrow. The whole idea is that food makes people feel better. So bring something to the table, even if it's just cookies. But the thought is that we do these to kind of help understand the why. Not just to tell them what's changing, but why it's changing. If you don't discuss the why, then cookies will not matter in this case, okay? The next thing is to determine the exact level of distress. This I get on a daily basis. Everybody's mad that we're changing. Everybody's mad. Everybody's mad. Well, let's really understand what that is. Is it 5%, 25%, 75%, or is it just Jonathan in accounting, right? Like, is that really what we're talking about? Is Jonathan just upset here about this change? When we find out the exact level of distress, and not just when the term everybody's upset, right? What does this really, really look like? Let's do some investigation. Then we can respond to it. In general, believe it or not, 2 to 7% are really your pitchfork-wielding people, okay? 2 to 7%. And some of them are going to retire in 6 months, right? Or they've already been applying to other jobs. They never liked being here in the first place, and they're out the door, right? But they're just going to yell and scream while they're leaving, okay? So it's 2 to 7%. So let's not join this fire of it's everybody's upset when it's really a small number most of the time, okay? So thinking about that is really important, I think, in terms of how we can respond to those situations. So the other quick tips here is to find a high-ranking executive advocate who can support this effort with you. If that can't happen, then all bets are off, in my opinion. How can we incentivize this? So one organization that I work with, they actually put this incentivizing into the performance review of the leadership, the work team leaders. That's a good way to determine if this project can be successful, is if you put it on their chart of work, right? If it's not part of their chart of work, then why do I care? I have these other things that I need to work on. But if part of the chart of work that that work team leader has is to make sure that there's a smooth transition in the workplace transformation, then they're accountable, right? So what we're asking for is accountability. That's a big part of what this looks like. An FAQ document, which everybody starts working on, but then it doesn't actually get out and published, right? There's so many questions that they don't feel like there's the right answer, and so it may not go out the door. What we ask is that it goes out the door, all right, what that looks like. And then are any of those concerns really valid that we need to really think about and move forward with? So that's one of the things that we got to think about in that process. How's my time? 15 minutes. All right, super. So number 8 is communicate intentionally, a bit of a soft one, folks, but stay with me. So here the thought is, if we don't give people information, they'll make something up to fill the void. You know that happens, right? That happens at organizations. If we don't give them the answer, they will give you the answer, and it won't be the answer that you want them to have, right? So one of the things that we need to understand here is, what is the grapevine saying? Does everyone in my department understand how his or her job and the work of the department will be affected by that change? Ways that we can respond to these kind of challenges around the grapevine is being able to communicate over and over again, to repeat. This is something that American is doing a lot of work around in a lot of different ways. So not just on the intranet site, but through lunch and learns, through town hall meetings, through various channels of communication, right? Through peer-to-peer kind of connections. So thinking about that is very important in terms of that conversation. Other ways that we can think about planning for communication, and I think this is where FM folks can really help in this process, is how can we make that whole experience in the place better for the communication plan? Is it by putting these town halls together? Is it by looking at toolkits that we can give to team members? Is it an open house kind of experience that we can share with people? What are the different activities, both physical and not, that can help in that kind of experience? So number 9, also soft, but stay with me, is the ability to catch people doing something right. This is really about recognition, right? So sometimes this is the whole idea of the good kid never gets, the principal doesn't know, right? Because they're always doing good stuff, but the vice principal, everybody knows the problem child. So this is the idea of really focusing on individuals that are doing good stuff. And you know who they are because you've done that stakeholder analysis, who your cheerleaders are. Acknowledging them, being able to praise those folks for what's going on. And if that can be part of a performance review, I know that that's not our jurisdiction in terms of FM work, but can we have meaningful conversations with HR to maybe make that part of a performance review experience? If we know that this move is happening in 2020 or 2021, et cetera, can we try and have this be part of that conversation in terms of performance review and evaluation? How were they successful in terms of part of that change? So acknowledging the appropriate behavior, really bringing that to the forefront and thinking about how we can celebrate that is important. So number 10 is to measure stuff that matters. Really, this is about creating metrics. And I think that this is where we can also play good work from an FM standpoint, is thinking about what those metrics to success can be. So do individuals understand how their work affects the measurement of this? Do they understand what it is that we're trying to achieve? One of the ways that you can do this, take it or leave it, is this thought around, does any organization use Gallup for their employee surveys? Maybe a survey around that? So Gallup has, and I like it very much, it's 12 quick questions. It's called the Gallup Q12. These are the 12 real questions that they have. And even if your organization doesn't use them, you may use a variation of them without knowing it. So I know what is expected of me at work. My associates or fellow employees are committed to doing quality work. These are real questions that they ask in the survey, and depending on how you answer will determine whether or not the employee or group of employees are engaged or disengaged, or the level based on how they answer this in the affirmative or negative. Okay? So stay with me. So what I'm asking is that we consider, and I'm just using this Gallup Q12, you use your version, whatever you use at your organization, but how can this method of thinking about employee engagement relate to the physical environment and the transformation that might be taking place? So, for example, I have a best friend at work. That's a real question that's asked in the Gallup Q12. If you answer it affirmatively, there's a lot of good research around this. If you answer this affirmatively, you are more likely to stay at that organization and be engaged and excited to come to work every day. If you answer this in the negative, you are out the door in 6 months, or you're looking for a job, right? And true fact, lots of good research around this. So in my mind, what the heck does this have to do with FM sort of stuff, right? Well, I think it's about connection, in my humble opinion. So if this is about connection, how can the physical environment help us allow an employee to answer this in the affirmative? And I know that it's more than just the space, right? They gotta like people there too. But how can the space help them? Again, my feeling is that if we have workstations that are to the wall where nobody can get to them, and they're 7-foot-high panels that nobody knows who they are, if they're even, are they even alive? Are they even there, right? Or they have this construction cardboard thing set up over their desk for nobody to come and visit them. The chance that they have a best friend at work, very few, ladies and gentlemen. So how can the physical environment really help that? And I'm just sort of looking at this one, but the idea is that we look at all of these 12, or whatever methodology you use, and think about how am I, from an FM standpoint, how can I support this, which then allows me to support employee engagement at my organization. So how can I be part of this conversation? Beyond just kind of HR, but what role can I play to support that? Okay? So that's what I'm thinking about in that kind of standpoint. The last one here is to lead from the heart, the last squishy one, okay? So this idea of leading from the heart is really about being passionate about a project, right? Because if we're not passionate about it, then nobody else is going to be. Because I have a very bad poker face, and people know that if I'm not excited about something, you can tell. So the idea here is that as FM leaders, we really do need to be passionate about the project. And if we're not, it will show. So leading from the heart is my thought around being excited about the project and really being that good cheerleader or championing what the project might look like. At the end of the day, we know that, from Darwin tells us, it's not the strongest or most intelligent that survive, but really the most adaptable. Those organizations that are being able to adapt to the transformation will move out of this in a very positive way. Those that can't will be acquired by another organization, or they will no longer be in existence. That's really the true fact of the situation, right? So we need to understand how adaptability can really help us be able to move forward in terms of organizational success and success of those folks. So again, if you want the lit review on this, go to Candace. She can give you all of that information. She may need a card or something, but I'm around, and I'm happy to. I think I'm good with time, right? Yeah. So I have. Okay. So we have a little bit of time for questions. Super. So that's it for me. Any thoughts, comments? I know folks want to get out the door too. So, anything?
If you could do one of those 11/12 things, what do you think is the most important?
The vision, the why. The big thing for me is to help understand the why. And I'm going to put them on the spot tomorrow, if they cannot tell us why we're doing this, beyond because Bob and Karen said so, then there is a problem. And that really needs to be understood. So the why is the big concern. And that's why if I'm asking that you might just think about, because the why has to matter from a business standpoint. When we do our visioning work with thousands of different organizations, 1,200 and something to be exact, these are the top 6, 7, 8 things that people tell us, as organizations tell us, as to why they want to go through this transformative change. These need to be part of that reason, or something else that's compelling. If it's not, then there's a problem, right? Then that transformation may not be successful. But to answer Lisa's question, the big thing is to understand the why. And if we can't, then all bets are off. All right? Yes, ma'am.
Is there a space where you're doing a transformation and you're talking a lot about the 7-foot cubes in the corners where you don't know if someone's alive? Is the reverse of that equally as detrimental, where you get too small of a space, too many people crammed in an area?
Right.
Where they
Yes.
can't function?
Yes. So the challenge is that we want to move to this kind of both and thinking, right? And not make the pendulum swing from one side to the other, right? So from fully private to just open and nowhere to do that kind of focus space
So to
work.
follow on to that, do you then have those conversations perhaps with a company who wants to go in that direction? Just cram people in, as many bodies as they can in a space?
Right.
And how you have that conversation?
Yeah. So it's thinking about the old days of Frederick Taylor and kind of what, putting folks at factory work and kind of how fast they can do something and how close can they get to move a widget from A to B to C, etc. So the thought is really having a deep conversation about what that human experience can be, and at what point are people, you think about factory farming and kind of at what point are you just squeezed to the point where success can't arise? And what are we really trying to achieve here? Is our goal to kind of move widgets along, or is it to be innovative in some way? What does that look like, right? What kind of space and environment can support those goals and objectives that we're trying to attract? And would you walk someone, a potential candidate, in your building? If you wouldn't, then there's a big problem with that, I think, for us to kind of think about.
Thank you.
All right? So I know folks have other places to go. I'll be around if you have any comments or questions. Thanks very much. But again, I appreciate being able to be here for a second time. Big deal for me. So thanks very much. Thanks, David. Thanks, Lisa.